Hey, this is Cinema Disclosed. I'll try to avoid this being the video therapy sessions of a for-hire filmmaker and focus more on key decisions, good or bad, throughout my filmmaking career thus far. I'll bring in my collaborators and you can find out with me what inspiring project they may happen to be working on at the time. Today, I'll go over the highest concept I've ever pulled off. No coincidence, it was while I was in grad school, but like most films, it almost never happened. And with all I learned throughout the process and what I get from it still today, I figured it would be a great place to begin our Cinema Disclosed series. Before I started making this film, I was about to start trying for a baby, imagining I would have a girl. Now we have my amazing son, who's 5. God's plan was way better, but it inspired my little sci-fi nerd heart to create a young, half-black, half-white American girl. I asked myself, what is the world I'd least want her to live in? One without me and her mother. One where she's not safe just because of who she was born to be. This idea harkens from all the age-old sci-fi stories about xenophobia and tyranny like X-Men or The Darkest Minds. Stories that help me and so many other minorities escape feelings of not belonging and powerlessness. I wanted to make my version. I also had a month-long crowdfund that honestly was just as hard as the production. And I'm no salesman, and I'm a big people pleaser, so spending a month begging for money to those whose opinion of me I care the most and selling myself. That was rough on me and my family. But I really appreciate our community at the time because the movie and everyone's experience simply just wouldn't exist. The conceptual art was key, and I get compliments on my production books and pitch decks to this day. Special shout out to my photo elective instructor. I tried my best to ignore that class, and she tried her best to shove Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator down my throat, and succeeded. Design skills that show up in my career at least once on a slow day. I'm going to release a video on how to professionally create conceptual art. I feel like it can be taken for granted, like it's playtime. Well, it is, but very integral playtime, my friend. Today you can learn how to prompt AI generators and create something decades past what I did, but have fun with all the biggest themes and visuals of your project. Identify the key elements and depict them in a visually compelling way via lookbooks, pitch deck, mood boards, spec script, sizzle reel, proof of concept videos, hell, a publicity stunt like Chronicle. Even props, merchandise, storyboards, projected budgets, potential locations, projected schedules. It's all art depending on who's looking at it. And the less information financiers, producers, crew, cast have, the less likely whatever is in your head will ultimately come out the way you intended. What you need to pull off your idea all needs to be communicated. If you're like me, you can put your producer cap on even as you write and start to see where the money needs to go. I also try to create a hard rule for everyone above the line that this is the time for big ideas, all right? Tell me about an epic establishing crane shot or the magical unicorn dragon now, and it's gonna cost me a week and $1,000. Tell me 15 minutes after call time, and I'm going to throw my cheap, lukewarm coffee on your body and take it out of your pit. I had just worked on The Darkest Minds and got fired from it too, but that's a story for another day. Super juicy. But before I was unceremoniously dismissed, I made friends with the lead cast as first team PA. LA friends, not like, real friends. If you do not know what an on-set production assistant is, I will do a video on that soon. And there are thousands of YouTube videos on PAing that already exist. So have fun with that rabbit hole and maybe pick the blue pill. Amanda Steinberg was our lead, and me and her geeked out all the time on the graphic novels that we were working on. Shout out to Harris and Pat too. You see my guy Harris Dickinson in Kingsman 3 and the Triangle Sadness? Do it now. I may or may not have been hoping Amanda would answer the phone when the time came, but At the end of the grueling casting process, a last-minute Instagram DM response brought me Katie Ann White, who had just wrapped her most recent season of Greenleaf. Special effects makeup was done by Emily Rockhill, whom had assisted in special effects makeup in my Student Emmy-nominated short film the previous year. And lucky for me, my Black Adam production crew teammate Kaylee Keene came through on the clutch for the blood squibs. She later went on to do all sorts of amazing special effects makeup and most recently painted the comedian Drewski in whiteface to help him stir up quite the commotion, similar to how Eddie Murphy did it on SNL decades before. I hate that I didn't consider how dark the ground was behind the blood on the overhead angle we shot. But she asked me on set if we could film the blood exiting her body after she's shot. I thought, sure, extra coverage is good. My cinematographer, Jen Kim, added to the idea by pulling the camera off the rig and finding a nice low angle, and my gaffer, Moneyman McNair, added some nice practical lighting from the alarms. But that was the most important footage for her bullet hit squibs. And she knew it before I did. She saved me the cost it took to bring her, her assistant, and her equipment. That note made it to the screen in a big way. Thank you, Kaylee. I'll never forget that. So I think it would be of nice value to take some time to finally tell a story that only exists in the back of my mind for the past several years. Maybe a memory to a therapist or two, but I think it would be helpful for any young filmmaker, especially a sci-fi nerd that wants to make high concept fantasy. Of course, there's a lot of AI technology now, but this is what I went through. The day before we began filming, I had to wake up first thing in the morning, pick up a U-Haul, and go to each of the places that I rented equipment from. No one was available to help that day, and I certainly couldn't pay anyone. So I drove to the prop place and loaded all the crazy set pieces. I went to the grip and lighting places to get equipment and all the little tools and toys my crew told me that they needed. The day is getting ahead of me and business hours are about to end. So properly strapping down all the expensive equipment was near impossible with the time restraints that I had. The whole time I'm answering phone calls, setting up particular elements with my cinematographer, first AD, location reps, talent. As I drive to my last stop to get a couple of filters and a matte box, I see that the place is about to close. So as I called the rental place, I hear all this expensive equipment in the back of the truck banging around, yay, sliding all over the place. And I'm worried if by the time we start filming the next morning, all that will be there is just a bunch of broken equipment and crippling debt with all the rental services. Joy, joy. As I plead to the rental rep on the phone, please, oh please, oh please, he explains he will not wait for me. I try to stall for time, but as we speak, I make a turn. Then the right side view mirror rams into a pole on the corner of the street and slams into the passenger window, smashing it into pieces and all over moi. I'm now begging to the rep as blood and sweat is dripping down my face as I drive to the location. I get there and of course, he's hung up and all the lights are out and they're locked up. I parked the U-Haul in front of our location for the first day and just sat there until I fell asleep. Eventually, I woke up and caught an Uber home to clean myself up and head right back to the set for our first day of principal photography. I still don't think that any of the crew members know about that story in full. Of course, I had to explain away the whole broken window all week. But honestly, I've done so many stressful things in my past for money or as an assistant on other people's sets that I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I knew I didn't do even more for my goals. Also, I know that if I expect my crew to take their time and energy and place them into one of my projects full-heartedly, come on, then I should be able to go even further. So 5 jam-packed production days later and a few reshoots over quarantine and it was all in the can. Ready to get edited. With all the thesis panels, articles, film festivals, awards, etc. One of the best, worst things that happened was when I got reviewed by a filmmaker roundtable.
Hi, my name is Bernard Pucher, and welcome to Centerframe's brand new show, Make It Short, where filmmakers can submit their work and get constructive feedback.
Child indigo. And it's something that, well, we've seen before so many times. And but I think what is different about this short film is that it turns into a more dramatic story very quickly early on.
A very revealing experience for a filmmaker is watching people watch your movie. It's a raw opportunity for feedback to make your next project better. Because I've been performing on stages since I was a child, I saw the value in that moment. Miss Collins leading us through 4th grade Lion King on stage. So magical, because I wanna be a mighty king. When you're on stage, the feedback is instant. You know whether or not your performance, the writing, the work, you know whether or not anyone feels it immediately. Even if there's just the bartender and a slightly annoyed sound engineer staring at you. If you have the courage to look, to feel, it all says a lot. I think they verbalize what had been told to me since the beginning, but maybe not what necessarily I intended. One basically said that it was a strong proof of concept that gets you excited for a bigger world.
And I think it becomes a more special film. You know, it could have gone wrong, or could have been very familiar and repetitive. And it is in the beginning, but then it turns out to be something quite original of that main character, which is a very good actress, by the way. Another one, I think she is very, very delicate in her performance here in this film. But I felt this TV pilot atmosphere while I was watching it, and maybe a second and a third episode could have made it more interesting and complete.
The other, notice how I applied my money and resources.
I think their ambition just like went a bit too far, and suddenly the film that they had, and again, I super respect anybody who tries to make a film and actually gets there, even if it's not successful. But I feel like simplification would have really served the story well.
Absolutely, I thought exactly the same. In fact, you end up with dialogues such as, "We're all trapped. This isn't even fair. We can stop them. We can break free. Simulated realities are nothing to us," which basically over-explains what the film is trying to do, and that's what you have to avoid when you make a film. But that's what happens when you have too much to tell in 15 minutes. Really, filmmaking is always a lot of hard work. When you don't want to add to it more logistical nightmare, finding all these props, be able to light all these people in an efficient way so it looks like a sci-fi. That's a lot to do. At the same time, you have to tell your story.
Exactly.
You have to keep it simple.
I know why they did it, but they needed much less of the things that they had, and if they had done less of it, all the resources they would have had, they could have put it into more production design. They could have put it into maybe some fewer characters, to focus more on the performances of our leads.
As tough as it was to hear, my thesis chair said the same thing when he read my script. And they both are right. I spent a lot of time and money on showing that I could do what my favorite sci-fi movies could do. I wanted to provide the same level of provisions and standards I saw on all the large production sets I worked on. The audience's experience. And I noticed that throughout the festival run. People respond to the action, the colors, captivating performances, but it's easy to get lost in the mythology of it all. Because somewhere in between producing this and writing my 40-page thesis and maintaining my family, I got lost. Remember that as a creative. Find that space and hold on to it for dear life. That space where you see the character as if they're staring right in front of you.
My favorite thing about this film was the moment when she's talking to the young version of her sister. Like, it's when they're in the bedroom and it's just her and the little girl, and the little girl was amazing. Like, she was actually really good. She was probably the most natural performance out of all of them, because I think she had the most fun, and we didn't need any of the other stuff. In fact, edit-wise, the simplification of it could have made for a more suspenseful and a more dramatic story, and could have focused on what I think was the best part, which was that two-hander in the bedroom.
I remember when J.K. Rowling described seeing Harry Potter walk onto the train she was on.
Harry Potter came to me on a train in 1990. I was sitting just staring out of the window.
Revere those moments. That's where your authentic story is. My favorite reaction from the audience is the ending of the film. Despite all the chaos, the army charges down the hall, the children assimilate, and everyone gets a nice rush of energy as the credits roll, and I always get a nice cheer at the end. You can check this link out to see the 17-minute short in its entirety, but I feel like it would be a little disingenuous if I didn't give a direct shout out to the inspiration for that scene, which is the final scene in The Matrix. Watch them both after this video and let me know if you noticed the resemblance. Throughout this video, I've shared a few BTS clips, but you can see the full 5-minute video that breaks down a bit further all it took to pull off Child Indigo. The key production elements of this film was by far the production design, locations, and visual effects. And I get into all those a little bit deeper in that video. Now, my favorite part of that behind the scenes video is this. It was probably the hardest thing that I've done in my life. Oh, enjoy the innocence, young man. Enjoy it while it lasts. I really have to thank my thesis chair for giving me the patience and media workflow skills that gave me confidence to pull off all the visual effects and manage me and my editing team. Mark Wilson was a visual effects artist on Westworld, and he basically taught me how to create numbering and naming conventions for files and folders, organizational tools, professional versioning, and note-taking tips that I didn't even realize really made it all possible. All the effects, all the sparkles, all the pixels. If I hadn't gotten the lockdown on all those elements before I started, I would have just created a big expensive mess. And honestly, as expensive as the film looks, it's a lot of cheap tricks and toys, and most of my budget was spent on my crew. I've been that crew member that did all these invisible, death-defying, or maybe just horribly injured-defying feats that make our favorite films possible. And I knew that if I vetted, inspired, pay, and take care of a lot of kind and talented professionals, as long as the script was good, I'd be fine. And at the end of the day, that kind of rings true. What's even crazier is that the more critical critic, his name is Bernhard Pucher, and me and him actually met as we both had films that were awarded at the Liftoff Film Festival. And I was finally able to let him know, honestly, just how impactful the time he took to analyze my film really was. And then I punched him in the face. Just playing. It was a Zoom call. And I love. But before I get caught in the romantics again, when I first pitched this story, I think about how much I cared about Amani and Zoe. Okay, that is pretty romantic, but I really think it's important. It's something a lot of us early in our career maybe forget, especially with all the fun new tools and all the fun content that's out there. I feel so bad for Amani and Zoe. Honestly, thinking about moments of our lives when we feel so alienated, trapped, so ashamed, so much guilt. And there are a lot of little things that I wish I could do differently. But more than anything, I wish I kept those feelings near me. So much goes on in a production, so many decisions to make. And as a director, I believe some of the best things that you can do for your crew and your story is to simply be the anchor of that feeling. The one who shepherds everyone through your character's smiles, tears, and being a conduit for the emotional beats and rhythm we all have to depict. After that thoroughly educative experience, my short films have been low concept, surprise, more character-based. I proved to myself that I could pull off a high concept similar to the big budget sets I assisted on, but then I needed to prove to myself that I could tell an honest character story with no sprinkles to mask story gaps. After pulling off the crowdfund, showing I could invest in myself, it got me a $15,000 investor on my next project, and the jobs I get even to this day are mostly inspired by the efforts, skills, and recognition I got from the digitally projected birth of Child Indigo. It's a girl. Below also is a link for my trailer if you want to check it out. Leave a comment and keep it real, my friends.